As a case, is there anything the state needs to address before we bring the jury in?
No, sir.
Anything from the defense?
Yes, Judge, if I may. As of yesterday, I had believed that the state would be done by noon. And so I had my expert, Ron Henson, see if he could reschedule, and he did. He was supposed to testify in Dubuque yesterday afternoon, but they changed it. They've said you can come here, and then he is going to be giving his testimony.
Counsel approach.
Oh, yeah.
Ms. Apper. They ready? Bring them in.
Yeah, thank you.
That works.
Yes, please. I can bring my next witness in.
Sure.
Okay.
I got it, thank you.
Jury's just coming in.
Okay. All rise.
All right, please be seated, everyone. We're continuing with the trial. State's next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. This state will call John LaPort.
Is it LaPort?
Yes.
Yes, come forward, sir. Witness box is behind the court reporter. Just make your way there. Just step up on that rise and raise your right hand. You swear that the testimony you're about to give us the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? Right, have a seat. Black bar where the red light is a microphone. Keep your voice up and directed there. All right, sir? All right, counsel, your witness.
Good afternoon, sir.
Hello.
Please state your name and spell it for the court reporter.
My name is John LaPort. That's Jonla, capital Porte.
Sir, how are you currently employed?
I am retired now.
And what kind of work did you do?
I was a computer consultant,
Okay.
local area networks mostly.
And did you have any side jobs that you used to work?
I still play music. I'm a musician.
Okay. And where do you typically play?
Usually upscale bars and restaurants and private parties, wine bars.
Okay. Have you ever played at a location known as Tabby's Wine Bar in Heartland?
Yes, I actually play there frequently.
Still today?
I still do, yes.
And how often would you say you're at Tabby's?
Probably about once a month.
Okay. And were you there last year on June 17th of 2023?
Yes, I was.
And prior to that, had you been there many times before to perform?
Yes.
Okay. And you know the layout of the facility?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And you recall that there was an incident that occurred at Tabby's on the night of June 17th of 2023, correct?
Yes, I do.
And do you remember what time you stopped playing?
It was a little bit after 10. I think it was 10:07.
Okay. And you were done for the evening then?
Correct.
So what did you do after you finished your performance?
As usual, I started packing everything up, put everything in cases, and then eventually I go and get my car. I park that usually right in front of the door so I can just bring things right out and load it into the car.
Okay. And during this time, when you're packing things up, did something draw your attention inside the bar?
Yes. Most of the people were gone at that point. There were some people that were coming in through the back entrance of Tabby's from a party at Beer Snobs. They had a street party going on with a band playing, and I could hear the band playing in between my songs because they were pretty loud.
Okay.
And they quit shortly, about the same time I did, probably around 10 o'clock or so. So they were done. So there were people coming in from that party into Tabby's from the back.
And at some point, did something different draw your attention?
Absolutely. Right in front of me, there were 3 tables where a lot of my friends had been sitting during the evening. Like I said, they were all gone at that point.
Okay.
The table furthest from me, there was a large gentleman standing in there with a light-colored shirt and light-colored hair. And the table closest to me then, there were 2 other gentlemen standing there. I mean, I saw people coming in and stuff, but it wasn't until the larger gentleman started yelling at the other 2. And
That's what drew your attention.
that's what drew my attention.
Did you know any of these men prior to this incident?
No, I did not.
Now, as you testify, do you know their names or have at least a first name for these people?
I do, because I've seen articles in the newspaper.
Okay. Do you know the name of the larger man that you were just describing for us?
Kevin Sehmer.
Okay. And of the other 2 men that you described, do you know any names for those individuals?
Josh Davies.
Okay. And the third man, did you ever learn his name?
I think it's Brian.
Okay.
I didn't know his last name.
So if we could, going forward, to keep your testimony easy to understand, let's use those names, okay? Sure. Okay. And the person you knew as Kevin, is he present in this courtroom here today?
Yes, he is.
And can you point out where he's seated and what he's wearing?
Sitting on the end of the table over there.
Okay. And that's the man that you now know to have the first name of Kevin.
Correct.
And you just described for us, you overheard him yelling at the other men.
Correct.
Tell us what you heard.
Couldn't hear a lot because it was kind of loud, but I did hear him saying something about, do you want to take this outside? Do you want a piece of me? The 2 guys standing there, Josh and Brian,
Yes.
were kind of looking at him dumbfounded, not saying much of anything.
So you didn't hear them reply in kind?
No, I didn't.
Did you hear them ever raise their voice
No.
or
Like I
ever
said,
curse?
Pardon?
Did you hear Josh or Brian curse in any way?
No, I did not. Like I said, it was difficult to hear all the words.
Did you hear Kevin Sehmer cursing or using profanity?
Yes, I did. He was much louder than the other two, so I could actually hear some of his words.
Okay. And your impression was that Josh and Brian were dumbfounded, you said?
Correct.
Did they,
What?
I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I object to her asking what they thought.
That's what his impression was.
His impression
Overruled.
about
Next
their-
question.
did you see them, Josh and Brian, physically approach Mr. Sehmer?
No, they stood at the end of the table there, and he was on the other end.
Okay. Did you see Mr. Sehmer approach Josh and Brian?
At one point, he came around the side of the table, but then he went back, and
See what he did when he got around the side?
he looked like he was pointing at them.
Okay. Could you hear, do you remember any words that were spoken during this time?
No, I did not.
Okay. And what do you remember next?
As I said, I was packing up my things. I'm going out to the car. I come back in and grab a couple other things, go back out. I remember Josh and his friend Brian walking out of the front door and walking down in front of Tabby's, and there's a pharmacy right next to that. So they're about a half a block from me. And
Okay.
the two of them were standing there talking.
Okay.
I couldn't hear them. They were too far away to hear what they were saying, but they're just standing there talking.
Okay. Did you see Kevin Sehmer at this point?
No,
Okay.
no, he was still inside. Shortly after that, then,
Hang on, let me ask you a question. Did you see Josh and Brian with any women?
inside there were.
Okay.
I guess it was a wife and a friend or a girlfriend or girlfriends or something.
But
Yeah,
that-
there were
that's
two
just what-
ladies with them.
Okay. Did you know that at the time? The relationship between Josh?
I didn't know the relationship. I just guessed that it was, either a wife or a girlfriend with them. And
Okay. And so when you saw Josh and Brian standing out on the sidewalk, did you see the ladies out there at that point?
no, they weren't. They were just out there by themselves.
And Mr. Sehmer was inside still?
Correct.
Okay. What do you remember next, sir?
Then I remember Josh walking back into Tabby's in the front door. I'm right here at my car.
Okay.
And the door's right here. And I thought, why is he going back in there? They obviously aren't getting along real well. And then I thought, well, maybe he's going back in to get the girls or something.
Okay. Did you see where he went, how far he went?
He went in the front door. He wasn't in there very long at all, seconds maybe.
Okay.
I don't think he was in there more than 30 seconds when I saw him come back out and walk back over to his friend, and he was standing over there with him.
Did you hear Josh say anything when he went back into Tabby's for that 1 or 2
No, I
seconds?
did not.
Okay. Could you hear anybody saying anything at
No.
that point?
I didn't
Okay.
hear anybody say.
Have to wait, sir. Have to wait for the question to be
Okay.
finished before
Sorry.
you answer, all right? Go
And-
ahead.
And you were by your car when you were making this observation?
Yes.
Okay,
And my car was right outside the front door there.
okay. And you just told us that Josh then returned to the sidewalk where Brian was.
Correct.
What do you remember next?
Seconds after that, I saw Kevin come out the front door, walked past the front of Tabby's. In front of Tabby's, there were some high-top tables and some shorter metal bar stools.
Okay,
He grabbed one of the bar stools,
who did?
Kevin did,
Okay,
as he walked past the front of it, walking towards the other two men standing, like, still same spot, half a block away in front of the pharmacy.
you saw him grab one of the stools.
Grabbed one of the stools.
And did you see Mr. Sehmer do anything with the stool?
He threw it, but I don't know if he was actually trying to throw it at him. I saw it hit the curb and bounce off into the street.
Okay. Did you later retrieve that stool?
Yes, I did.
And where was it when you picked it up?
In the street, and I put it back in front of Tabby's.
Okay. Those stools are always out there. with
Yes,
the
they're
sun.
always out there. Correct.
Okay. And so you said you saw Kevin Sehmer throw the stool, but do you know if it hit anybody or anything?
Just the curb as far as I know.
Okay. What do you remember next?
Next, I remember he had walked all the way down there, and he was right in front of the two guys. And pretty close to them, and Josh just took like one step forward, and I saw Kevin hit him. It looked like either with his fist or with a forearm smash, kind of, and then I saw Josh fall flat back on his head
Okay.
and was laying there on the concrete.
Did you see Josh with a stool at any time?
No,
Did you see Josh with a stool above his head?
no. The only stool I ever saw was the one that I picked up and put back.
And that was the one that you saw being thrown by Kevin Sehmer.
Correct.
Did you see Josh ever make a swinging motion?
No,
Did you see Josh throw any punches?
no.
How many punches total did you see?
Just one
From who?
from Kevin.
And did you see it strike anybody or anything?
Saw it strike Josh.
Where?
It was hard to tell because Kevin's pretty big, and probably either, right in the front or in his face.
Okay. And did you see what happened with Josh right after that?
Right after that, I saw him coming back towards me, and he went down the street on the south, towards the south on the sidewalk.
Meaning Kevin?
Kevin did, yes.
Okay. I'm sorry, because maybe it wasn't very clear. What happened to Josh after you saw Kevin deliver
Josh
the
fell straight back onto the concrete, and his head obviously hit the concrete.
Did you see that?
I saw it kind of looked like it bounced.
Yeah.
I saw
Like a
his
whiplash.
friend standing right next to him there, Brian.
Folks, you're talking over each other.
I apologize.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So you saw Josh drop and hit his head.
Correct.
What part of his head, do you remember?
Back of his head. It's like he fell completely straight back.
Okay. And you saw the head bounce off the pavement?
Judge, I object, it's been asked and answered.
Overrule. He answered. His answer stands. Next question.
Did Josh, when he was in that motion of dropping, did you see him put his arms back to try and brace his fall in any way?
He looked like he just went straight back.
Okay. And then Kevin did what?
Kevin walked south on the sidewalk and disappeared down the street.
Okay. Did you hear Kevin say anything during this incident out on the sidewalk?
No, I did not.
Did you hear Josh say anything during this incident out on the sidewalk?
No, they were too far away to hear what they were saying.
Did you hear Brian say anything out on the sidewalk?
No.
Did you, were you drinking alcohol that night, sir?
I don't drink at all.
Okay. All right, thank you, sir. Those were my questions.
Cross.
Thank you, Judge. Mr. LaPort, I understand that you had been at Tabby's for some period of time that evening?
Correct.
Okay. And you were finishing at about what time? If you
10:07.
recall.
10:07.
07, okay. And I think the video, I can see you packing up your board, your keyboard, is that right?
Yes, I have keyboards.
Okay. And then you, at some point, you're hearing this argument, disturbance in Tabby's, is that right?
Correct.
It's kind of while you're packing up, is that
Yes.
right? And then you went outside and you loaded your car, is that right?
Correct.
And did you ever, after you loaded your car, did you ever have to move the car? I don't mean forever, because it's obviously not still there,
No.
but you left it there until when? Relative, and I don't mean
I was
timeline.
loading it until the paramedics.
Please, please.
Let me start
You
over.
have to wait until the question is finished before you begin your answer. And you have to wait until his answer is done before you begin your question. Because we're getting into a conversation here, and that's gonna make this lady's work impossible. All right? You wanna re-ask the question?
I will, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
You indicated that your car was in front of Tabby's when you were loading it up. Is
Correct.
that true?
Correct.
And I know at some point you indicated that you later, after the incident outside, picked up a stool from the road. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, did you ever move your car from being directly in front of Tabby's to any other location that evening or that night?
Not until I left for the evening.
Okay. And did you leave before law enforcement came?
No.
Okay, so law enforcement had already come.
Correct.
Okay. And so when law enforcement came, your car should have still been right in front of Tabby's. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. You have a blue car?
Yes.
Okay. Hatchback?
Correct.
When you lift that hatchback, does the light go on?
Yes.
Okay. So, as I understand it, you saw Josh and his friend leave Tabby's and go about a half a block away in the direction of the pharmacy. Is that true?
Correct.
And they remain there talking to each other until at some point later, Josh returned to the front door of Tabby's. Is that true?
Correct.
Do you have any sense of how long it was before Josh went to, or returned to that front door?
Not more than 5 minutes.
Okay. And you were still by your car, so you saw him open the door and say something, correct?
I saw him open the door.
And is that all you didn't hear anything?
I did not hear him
Okay.
say anything.
And was that because there was too much noise or you just couldn't hear anything?
Just wasn't hearing any.
Okay. And then Josh leaves and goes back to where he was with Brian earlier, correct?
Correct.
About a half a block away.
Correct.
And it was sufficiently far away that you couldn't really hear what they were saying. Is that true?
Correct.
And then a period of time later, you see Mr. Sehmer leave, correct? Leave Tabby's.
Yes.
He exits Tabby's.
Correct.
And he goes towards them.
Correct.
And he encounters them about a half a block away.
Where they were standing. Correct.
Okay. And sometime prior to Mr. Sehmer getting there, getting to them, he had either pushed or kicked or knocked over somehow a stool. Is that right?
No.
Okay, it's not right. Did you see him throw a stool?
Yes.
Okay. And he threw it towards the street?
He threw it towards where they were standing, and he hit the street.
Did he throw it a half a block in the air?
No, he was getting close. He was walking with it to them.
Okay.
He had picked it up as he went past Tabby's.
Okay. And at some point, as he's walking past Tabby's, you say he threw the stool.
Correct. He picked it up as he walked past Tabby's, continued walking towards them, and threw it while he was walking.
And you believe, I think, it didn't hit anybody, correct?
Correct. I don't think it did.
Is that true?
Correct.
And you didn't see, for example, Josh pick up the stool?
No.
Okay. And so you're still, I presume, while watching this, you're somewhere near the front of, you're still near your car?
Yes.
Okay. In front of the front door of Tabby's?
Yeah, my car is like 10 feet from the front door.
Okay. And you didn't see Josh holding a stool in his hand?
No.
You didn't see Josh holding a stool over his head?
No.
Did you see any other people other than Josh and Brian in the area where Josh encountered Mr. Sehmer?
No.
Okay. And how far away from Josh was Mr. Sehmer when Josh was struck?
3 feet, 4 feet maybe.
Okay? And you indicated, I think, that at some point, just prior to being struck, if I'm right, you saw Josh move towards Mr. Sehmer. Is that true?
Correct.
Okay. And then he was struck, is that right?
Correct.
And there was nobody next to him, correct?
His friend Brian was standing next to him.
Well, when I mean next, I mean like, was he within, a foot or so of him?
I'd say Brian was like 2 feet from him, maybe. They were still standing there talking. And it's like he just took one step forward. You got to remember that Kevin had walked all the way down there with a bar stool and was moving pretty fast. So he was kind of in motion up to Brian, and then Brian just took one step, half a step towards him.
Towards him or away from him?
Yeah, probably towards him.
Okay, so he wasn't backing away or anything.
Didn't look like it.
Got a
Looked
lot
like-
of he's and hims.
Oh, I am so sorry, I meant Josh wasn't moving backwards, according to what you saw.
Did not look like he was moving backwards.
Looked like he moved forward shortly before the fight, or the punch.
Yeah, about a half a step or so.
Okay. All right. And he fell straight backwards.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you, I have nothing further.
Any redirect?
Nothing, thank you.
All right, may this witness be released?
Yes.
Any objection?
No, sir.
All right, sir, you can go about the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Could I see counsel, please?
Yes, please.
Just come up here.
You're free to go, thank you. After me? She is. Swear her in. Okay. 1 minute. I asked her to be here at 1:30.
Okay,
so
all right.
she's got
We're just
12
waiting for
seconds.
a witness that's on the county campus. If you need to stand and stretch, go ahead, and feel free to do that.
Okay, so we're gonna do that. We're gonna do the medical examiner first, it's not gonna be long, and then and Ron.
The witness box is behind the court reporter. Set your material down. And just raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give us the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, self the truth?
I do.
All right, have a seat. All right, counsel, your witness.
Thank you. Ma'am, could you please state your name and spell it for the court reporter?
Linda, Lynda, Bitterkzy, Biedrzykki.
And how are you employed?
I'm the medical examiner for Waukesha County.
How long have you had that job?
I think it's about 28 years and 2 parts.
Okay. You were here and left for a while and then returned.
Yes.
Okay. And what are your duties as a medical examiner?
Well, the state statute says we need to investigate, medical examiners need to investigate deaths in certain categories. And that investigation can include performing exams and autopsies. So I'm in charge of investigating the deaths, and I personally perform autopsies.
What is your educational background, please?
Well, I have a degree in biology, and then I went to medical school at the Medical College of Wisconsin. Then I did a year of internal medicine, and then I changed to pathology, and I trained in pathology at the Medical College, the University of California, San Diego, and at William Beaumont Hospital. I did a fellowship in forensic pathology, which is the specialty that does the medical examiner work in Detroit, Wayne County, Michigan. And I did a fellowship in cardiovascular pathology in Boston at Brigham and Women's Hospital.
Is all of this summarized in your curriculum vitae?
Yes.
All right, I'd like to put up just for the witness, Exhibit 21, please. Do you have it, doctor?
Yes.
Okay. And it appears on the right side of the screen, I can see this is a 7-page document, is that correct?
Oops. I don't draw, it's on a scroll. Okay, yeah.
You like that screen?
Yep.
Okay, and we just scrolled through that very quickly, but you recognize this as your curriculum vitae.
Yes.
This is a document you created,
Yes.
and it summarizes all your professional training and experiences,
Yes.
correct? Okay. What is the field of pathology?
Well, pathology is the study of disease, and that includes everything. Part of it is laboratory medicine, any urine or blood sample, any biopsy or tissue taken. That comes to a pathologist, and we interpret that. Microbiology, blood banking, toxicology, clinical chemistry, cytology, it all falls under pathology in the medical sense of pathology.
Are you board certified in any way?
I'm board certified in clinical pathology, which is the laboratory part, and anatomic pathology, which is the tissue examination part, including autopsy, and forensic pathology, which is where pathology intersects with legal matters and is the investigation often of traumatic and non-natural deaths.
And are you licensed to practice medicine in the state of Wisconsin?
I am,
Have you ever testified in court before?
yes,
About how many times?
a few hundred times.
Okay. Have you ever testified in a case where the cause of death was believed to be related to a head injury?
Yes,
Can you estimate how many times you've done that?
well, probably dozens of times.
Okay. And were you asked to perform an autopsy on a person by the name of Joshua Davies?
I did perform an autopsy on Mr. Davies, yes.
And did you create a report to document your findings?
Yes, we create something called an autopsy protocol, which is a document stating all my observations at the time of autopsy.
All right. I believe I failed to request admission of Exhibit 21. I'm not seeking publication.
Any objection?
No, sir.
Exhibit 21 will be received.
And then please display for the witness only number 22. Do you recognize Exhibit 22, Doctor?
Yes, this is the autopsy protocol on Mr. Davies.
Again, this is a document that you authored.
Yes,
Okay. And does it contain your observations and findings from the autopsy?
it does.
Okay. Move to admit 22, please.
Any objection?
No.
22 will be received.
If you could please go back to page 1. And if you know these things off the top of your head, fine. Otherwise, I'm going to ask you to please refer to page 1 of Exhibit 22 and tell us the dates of the autopsy for Mr. Davies.
Well, I did his external exam first, which was on July 12th of 2023, and the internal exam of the autopsy after on July 13th.
Do you know the date of death for Mr. Davies?
I believe it was July 12th.
Okay. So that same day,
Yes,
you did your external, and the next day the internal.
yes,
Okay. Did you document Mr. Davies' age at the time of his death?
39 years old.
And it might be in maybe the next page or the page after. Did you document the height and weight for Joshua Davies?
Yes, I'll need to look at this to
Okay.
refresh my memory.
All right, I believe it's on page 2.
Yes.
Okay.
73 and a half inches tall and 130 pounds when I saw him.
Okay. And you know that Mr. Davies was in the hospital or hospitalized for quite a period of time prior to his death, correct?
Yes,
And so his weight of 130 pounds at the time of autopsy, is that the same as his weight a month earlier on June 17th of 2023?
well, I noticed when I reviewed the medical records that according to the bed scale, when he was admitted to the hospital, his weight was 159 pounds.
Okay. Is that unusual for him to have suffered such a weight loss in that period of time?
Well, this is almost 30 pounds would be a big weight loss, and I also am wondering about bed scales in terms of did he have medical devices or anything on him when he was in the bed scale, rather than when I weigh somebody, they're free of any devices or clothing.
Sure. But these give us a good general indication of his weight at the time he was admitted to the hospital and then at autopsy.
Yes.
Okay. Were you able to determine a cause and manner of death for Mr. Davies?
Yes.
Can you please explain those terms to the jury?
The cause of death is the injury or disease that starts the process and is continuous until the time of death, because sometimes an injury occurs on day 1, but death doesn't occur till day 5. So that's why we say it that way. The manner of death is the circumstances under which death occurs. Manners of death would be homicide, suicide, accident, natural, or undetermined, when there's evidence that weighs on 2 other causes of death, or you simply don't have enough information. Say a skeletonized body with no soft tissue and their circumstances don't reveal a story, so then that would be undetermined.
What type of information do you need in order to determine cause and manner of death?
Well, cause of death is a medical opinion. It's basically my diagnosis. So I need a foundation to make that opinion. So I look for disease and injury in the cases that come to me to form an opinion as to cause of death.
And what about manner?
Manner of death, you look at the cause because some causes would exclude some manners, for example, possibly. But you look at the disease and injury, but you also look at the context and the circumstances.
Okay. And was your autopsy that you performed on Mr. Davies instrumental to your conclusions in this case?
Oh, yes.
And did you rely on anything else aside from the autopsy?
I did know the circumstances. They were the circumstances of how these head injuries that Mr. Davies sustained were consistent among multiple histories that I read. So the medical record, the EMTs, witness statements, police reports, they all reflected how this head injury occurred.
Okay. And if you could please go to back to page 2 of Exhibit 22. Ask you about your documented findings at autopsy, please. So did you observe any injuries to Mr. Davies?
Yes,
And those are documented on page, well, it's listed as page 1, but that's because there's a cover sheet, right?
correct.
Okay. So what's on 22 at the top, it says page 1, there's your findings.
Yes,
Okay. Please describe your findings for the jury.
okay. The first category is craniocerebral injuries, which means injuries to the bone, the cranium, and the cerebrum or the brain. And those included an occipital skull fracture. The occiput is the back of your head, and his fracture was on the left. And if you, I mean, you don't have to do this now, but if you found the point of your skull that was kind of protuberant, the occipital protuberance, and you drew a line down toward the base of your ear, that's where his fracture was, left occipital. He had a subdural hematoma. That is blood that collects between, if this is the skull in my hand and this is the brain, it's blood that collects between that, those two entities, so it can compress the brain. So there'd be blood in that space. Next are cerebral contusions, which are bruises to your brain itself, to the gray and white matter. They actually are hemorrhagic and bruised from contact with the inside of the skull. Intraparenchymal hemorrhage, which means hemorrhage on the inside of the brain. So I'm going to use my hands again. If my cerebrum is here, left and right cortex, and inside, there are structures where my thumb is. There was hemorrhage deep in the brain, besides the contusions that would be on the surface of the brain. And then he had secondary cerebral edema. So your brain swells as a sequelae of the injury. So not only does he have bleeding in the brain and over the brain, but then his brain says, this is really a problem for me, and then the brain tissue itself just swells.
So if I can ask a few questions that probably will not sound too artful. You described the skull fractured back left side of the head.
Yes.
Do you have an opinion as to what may have caused that injury?
Falling to the ground.
Okay. And the subdermal hematoma, do we have blood between the brain and the skull?
No, not at all.
So that's very unusual that you would find blood in that location.
It's an injury. It's abnormal, yeah.
Okay. The contusions to the brain you described, and then you described, I believe in item D, deep hemorrhage. Correct?
Yes, correct.
Do you have an opinion as to what would cause injury to the deep portions of the brain?
We'll call it shearing forces. So now the anatomy I described and why I wanted to tell you where the fracture was. So there was also a hematoma over the back left part of the scalp. So that was the contact point. But the contusions were in the front of the brain, frontal and temporal. That's contracule, if you've ever heard that word. It means that the head, it's a result of a moving head striking an object. So the head, back of the head hits the ground, but because the brain is in fluid inside the skull, it's almost like a yolk of the egg inside the shell. The skull hits the ground first before the brain does, and so the inside of the skull hits the brain opposite of the point of impact. So if the impact's in the back, the contusions are in the front. And if the impact's on the left, you might have contusions on the right. So it's because of the brain, it's characteristic of a moving head injury versus somebody being hit with a bat in a stationary skull. So the energy that also occurs that's transmitted through the brain, it's referred to as a shearing force. And the hemorrhages that were deep in Mr. Davies' brain were in an area called the basal ganglia, which is again deep where I showed where my thumbs would be. And these nuclei have a different composition than the white matter surrounding them. So it's a point of where shear forces may be seen more commonly because of the difference in the tissue deep there. So as the energy goes from the back of the brain to the front through this moving injury, it shears internal structures as well. So that's why he had bruises on the outside of the cortex hitting the inside of the skull, be it had internal injuries from the forces that caused differential movement between the structures of the brain. Does that make
Yes.
sense? Okay.
Do you have an opinion as to the amount of force that would be necessary to cause this type of injury?
It's quite significant, particularly because it's not common to have these deep shearing injuries. And also the back of the skull is not the thinnest part of the skull. It's maybe not the thickest, but it's not the thinnest. So there's considerable force in order to cause a fracture in that area.
Okay. Finally, item E, the cerebral edema, is that swelling in the brain?
It's swelling of the brain.
Okay, and that's a bad thing too.
Yes.
Why?
The brain is contained in the skull, so if you have swelling, it's forced through apertures. You can get forcing of the brain through the bottom of the skull going to the spinal cord. You can get forcing of the brain from the right side to the left side, and that causes injury to that portion of the brain that's basically squished into another compartment.
Was there any medical intervention or treatment that was possible for any of these 5 injuries?
They did drain the subdural hematoma, and they did remove, actually, a large part of the left side of his skull, called a craniectomy. And they froze that piece of skull to get replaced later. But by removing the piece of skull that allows the brain to swell out rather than push the other side in or down, and the draining of the blood, the subdural blood also causes pressure on the brain. That's why it's bad, because it's supposed, the space should be empty, so when it's filled, it causes pressure. So they drained the blood, they removed that piece of bone, then they went in and they put another drain in to try to drain the deep hematoma. Those were the first 2 operations. And then later in his hospital course, there was a reaccumulation of that blood, and they drained it again.
Okay. We heard testimony earlier from his wife that Josh was hospitalized for about a month, and that during that time he became somewhat alert, I believe is the terminology she uses. Would that surprise you?
No.
But never was like fully conscious or able to speak or things like that. Is that consistent with your opinion?
Yes.
Okay. So let's continue with your findings then, please, back from the autopsy. So paragraph 2, please.
He also, as a consequence of the hospitalization, and he also had a breathing tube several times, he developed bronchopneumonia. It's a pretty common complication of prolonged hospitalization.
Okay. Item 3.
He had a left psoas hematoma. The psoas is your deep muscle along your spine, deep in your core, that allows you to lift your legs. It's a very important core muscle. And right in the middle of the muscle, so the muscle's like this, right in the middle of it, there was a hematoma.
Do you have any opinion as to what may have caused an injury like that?
I think the force of landing on that left side of his body.
Okay. And then finally, your 4th finding.
He had what I called a myxomatous mitral valve. That's a natural disease. His valve in the left ventricle, called the mitral valve, had a spongy quality, and microscopically it was thickened with a substance that would normally not be there in that amount.
That was in his heart?
In his heart.
Okay. What did you conclude as to cause of death, please?
Complications of craniocerebral injuries.
Did the heart problem kill him?
No.
Okay. And you detailed for us very thoroughly these injuries that you observed and explained them to us, but can you just explain that ultimate conclusion? What killed Mr. Davies?
A terrible brain injury. Yeah.
Okay. Were you able to make a determination as to manner of death?
Well, manner of death was homicide.
Judge, excuse me, I'm objecting to this,
You're objecting to what, sir?
to her testimony regarding the manner of death, since it's based upon the review of police reports and et cetera, according to her earlier testimony.
This feels like it's going to need some argument.
Well, we've may be able to do it at a sidebar, but yes, I would like to respond.
Let's try the sidebar first.
Okay.
All right, the court has overruled the objection. We had an answer from the witness. Do you have another question?
We did not receive the answer yet, Your Honor.
You want to hear the question again, or do you want to repeat it? Because
I
I
could
thought we heard an answer, and then there was an objection after the answer. You want the reporter to read it back?
I would just ask it again, Judge. And
Okay,
pick up where I
perfect.
left off.
Go ahead.
So, Doctor, did you form an opinion as to the manner of death for Joshua Davies?
Yes,
And what was your conclusion?
that it's a homicide.
And what did you base that on?
Because it was an act of another, intentional act of another, that caused the injury that led to his death.
Okay. And that's a medical determination by you at this point, not a
It's-
legal.
No, I'm sorry, that was a confusing answer. It is a medical opinion, not a legal opinion.
Okay. Would you say, in your opinion, Doctor, that the injuries suffered by Joshua Davies, you've already testified, would have required significant force, in your opinion?
Yes,
Would you say it would be consistent with Mr. Davies tripping over an object?
No,
Why not?
not enough acceleration. Force and injury caused by, injuries are caused by force. Velocity is the main determinant of force, as well as, I mean, you could have less velocity with a more vulnerable site, but as I said, that's not a very thin part of the bone. And there was all this shearing force that traveled through the brain to cause the deep hemorrhage. So those are indicators of significant force from acceleration. If you just trip, you really don't get that amount of force.
Okay. Thank you, doctor. Those are all my questions.
Thank you, Cross.
Thank you. Doctor, you had a chance to review the medical records, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, doctor, I'm going to show you what's been marked as exhibits 1, 7, and 108 that have been shown to the state already, Judge.
So you're,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, these are the ones
you want
you emailed.
107?
Oh, thank you.
Well, we could do one at a time. Or you're gonna show them physically?
Yes, I'm going to show you.
All right, go ahead. Get so used to the TV that I think everything's coming up there.
Doctor, I'd like you to just take a moment to look at those. I don't think it'll take you long, because I'm going to ask you about a specific item of information on that.
Okay.
All right. The hospital did a blood test on Mr. Davies when he was admitted, is that correct?
They did a lot of them.
Okay. And one of the tests they determined is on exhibits 107 and 108, which shows that his alcohol level was 0.267.
Here it's 267, which would be.
267.
Yeah.
Okay. And we don't know if that's whole blood or serum, do we?
No,
Okay. If it were whole blood, then 267 is 267, correct?
correct.
That's a very high alcohol level, is it?
It
Not?
is.
Okay. Now, if it were hemoglobin, I think you believe that then it would be 2.4. Does that sound right?
No, if it was serum,
Serum, I'm sorry.
yes. If the test was done on serum, the equivalent blood alcohol, because blood alcohol, as we speak about it for drunk driving and such, refers to whole blood. So if it's serum, the conversion would make it lower.
I think 2.4.
Yes,
Is that right?
yes,
Okay, that's also a high level, correct?
yes.
Okay. So we know that this young man had hit some concrete. Everybody appears to agree with that. Is that right?
That's my understanding.
Okay. Now, and you indicated that tripping wouldn't typically show that much force, correct?
Correct.
Now, however, what if the person who fell in part because he was trying to swing a heavy object like a metal stool, and that was blocked, as that person had kind of, in this case the deceased, had kind of gone airborne trying to hit somebody. Would that increase the velocity of his fall?
I think the hypothetical would depend on the resistance met by the stool, or whatever because it would be the transmission of the force through Joshua's body that would still be necessary and in an accelerated fashion to cause the fall.
Right. Newton's third law of motion, correct?
Oh, I don't remember if that's it, but
So if somebody is moving with a lot of force and then it meets an object that's moving force away, that's going to transfer that velocity into the person.
Well, it can and it can't. I mean, if you think about car crashes, it really depends on, the collision. Sometimes one side gives, sometimes the other side gives. A hard force meaning a hard force. So we're getting into more physics than I think I could possibly give you a single answer to.
Okay, all right. But you understand that the issue of velocity, how that can get transferred to, in this case, Mr. Davis, could depend upon how exactly what he was doing and what force it meant when he did it, correct?
Well, yes. Mhm.
Okay. Now, would you agree that a person who has either a blood alcohol level of 267 or 24 would be intoxicated?
I would say yes.
I mean, you are probably aware from your work that the legal alcohol limit for drivers is .08, correct?
Yes,
This is well over that, correct?
yes,
It's almost 3 times, correct?
yes,
And that would affect their coordination, correct?
yes,
And their ability to operate in space, I mean physically,
yes,
correct?
correct.
And they would have a harder time doing physical acts than somebody who didn't have such a high BAC.
That's true.
And so the likelihood that a person with an elevated BAC level is more likely to have less ability to both control themselves and, if they're falling, to control their ability to break the fall, for example.
That's true.
Is that true? All right. I have nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Yes, just briefly following up on that. Does tolerance play a role in that?
Yes.
Can you describe further?
Well, again, just thinking back on my experience, they say that people would die at a 0.40 alcohol. And I have patients that have come to me from hospital that have walked into the hospital at over a 0.4, okay? So there are people that develop tolerances. Also your that metabolism is a different story. But yes, there are people that can tolerate more alcohol than others.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Therefore, if a person can handle the alcohol better than another, does that, can they therefore control their movements and their balance and things like that better?
For any individual, you can't really say for sure what level of impairment any particular blood alcohol would be. You know, that's individual. But in general, we know alcohol causes these certain things.
Thank you.
Any recross on that limited scope?
Yes. So when you talk about tolerance, you mean somebody who drinks a lot. Is that what you mean?
Yes, they become tolerant.
Okay. And to be able to have high BACs like you were speaking of with that one of your patients, those are people who are drinking not small amounts, but a large amount of alcohol every day.
That's true.
All right. Thank you. I have nothing further.
May this witness be released.
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Leave the exhibits here.
Oh, thank you, and I appreciate that.
Council approach, please.
Are they still up there? Yeah. Okay. Judge, I am going to move in.
Just a minute, just a minute. Defense is moving 107.
Yes.
Any objection?
No objection to 107.
107 will be received. All right, we're going to, ladies and gentlemen, take a witness out of order. Sometimes this happens in trials. We have witnesses that may travel or they have other conflicts in their calendar, and there's been an agreement between the parties for a witness to be taken out of order. The next witness is a defense witness, someone that Mr. Shiro is going to call. Ordinarily, that would be in his portion of the case, but we get to chew gum and walk at the same time when we have trials, and so we're going to allow the defense witness to go forward now. Mr. Shiro will go first, and then cross-examination will be by the state. This case is still with the state, but the defense will have the case, and this witness will be part of it. Is all that accurate?
It is, sir.
Mr. Shiro, you're calling a witness?
Yes, please.
Who are you calling?
Dr. Ronald Henson.
Dr. Henson, all right. You want to get him? Dr. Henson, would you come forward, please? The witness box is behind the court reporter. If you'd make your way there. You want to set your material down? And just raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? I will. Have a seat. That black bar with the red light is a microphone. Keep your voice up and directed towards that. Mr. Shiro, this is your witness.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I wasn't listening because I was talking to counsel. Did you state your name?
I did not.
Would you state your name and spell it?
Yes, Ronald Henson, Ronald Henson.
Okay. And what do you do for a living, sir?
I'm an independent consultant in drug and alcohol-related matters. I work for insurance companies, employers, civil law firms, and also criminal law firms.
Okay. And I'm going to ask you about your background in education. Okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is bring you exhibits 104 and 105, which are part of your CV. Okay? And an addendum to your CV. With your permission, Judge.
Please approach.
Looking at your CV, page, or exhibit 104, how many pages is there?
It is, should be 20, there's actually another, so this is 22 pages.
Okay, and there's an addendum to your CV.
There is an addendum,
That's exhibit what?
105,
How many pages is that?
and that is 6 pages.
Okay, if I may, and you can reference your CV if you need it, but I'm going to ask you first about your education. Can you tell me all about your post-high school education?
Sure, post-high school, from the vocations, I'm a graduate of Illinois State Police Academy with also additional advanced coursework, training with regards to drugs and alcohol. From academia, I have 4 college degrees. I have an associate degree in sociology and psychology with studies in drugs and alcohol. I have a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Illinois. It was in their criminal justice program, and I received additional training in drugs and alcohol, physiology and pharmacology through that program. I have a master's degree of public administration from Governor State University. It's a state school in Illinois. And my thesis was driving under the influence, processes and procedures for law enforcement, specifically to Illinois law enforcement. I have a PhD degree from Walden University in Minneapolis, Minnesota. My residency was performed at Indiana University. My subject matter dealt with drug and alcohol testing in the workplace, so it was in the management program and decision sciences since I was dealing with employees and employers, but it was regarding drug and alcohol testing in the workplace.
Have you written any articles or books regarding anything related to drug and alcohol testing or the effect of drugs and alcohol?
Yes, I have multiple book chapters as well as a college textbook chapter. I've been the reoccurring author for the Illinois Institute for Continuing Legal Education on chemical testing. That started in 1995, 96 timeframe, and I just submitted the galley proofs for the publication to be updated this fall of 2024. I've published in Understanding Scientific Evidence by Thomson Reuters. That was published a few years ago. I published a college textbook chapter regarding alcohol, alcohol production, physiology, and pharmacology. And that textbook was used by Illinois State University because I frequently appeared as a guest lecturer in relationship to that chapter, as well as I'm not sure what other universities use that chapter, but that was published by Kendall Hunt Publishing out of Dubuque, Iowa. And there are at least a couple others.
Okay. Have you done any teaching?
I have.
Where have you taught and what subjects?
Starting in 1986, I started teaching at the University of Illinois at the Police Academy, the Police Training Institute, in drugs and alcohol, breath, blood, urine testing, and the methods of collection of evidence, the methodology of testing, the results, alcohol extrapolation, which is ante looking forward, and then also retrograde is looking backwards. And
Can I just stop you for a second? What do you mean by that?
If I were to dose somebody, if you said I need to get somebody to a 0.10, I would take their gender into account. I would take their body weight into account. I would take into account when they last ate. And I would utilize a calculation to program them to drink a certain amount of alcohol that would get them to that 0.10. I've dosed over 1,000 people and always been within plus or minus 0.01 of my calculations. Looking backwards in time, where we have a time where a person is peaked in blood alcohol concentration, and they're now on the downward slope. Sometimes questions come up as to what were they at some time earlier in their drinking process. And so then you could look at oxidization rates or no metabolism rates for the alcohol that the body goes through and be able to make that calculation as well. So I think here in Wisconsin, they use what's called a Henson chart, and the Henson chart is based on Woodmark's formula.
Okay. So, but I interrupted. You were talking about other teaching you did?
Sure. So I taught, starting in 1986 and 1988, I was put in charge of the teaching program at the University of Illinois for law enforcement with regards to the drug and alcohol, biological specimen collection, testing, training law enforcement. I also trained people from the medical profession with regards to the forensic side versus the clinical side of blood alcohol, urine alcohol evidence. That continued till the mid-1990s. And then early 2000s, I started my own drug and alcohol testing laboratory, and that's still in existence today. I sold it after about 3 years, but I remain as a consultant all the way to today, and it's an operation in Peoria, Illinois. I have also been a professor at Iowa Wesleyan College in, redundant, but it's in Iowa. And then I've also taught online and was Dean of Online Instruction for Aspen University as well. So that's, in a nutshell, as best I can, my teaching experience.
Why don't you tell us, or please tell the jury about your employment history.
Employment history, I started out as a police cadet in 1979, so about 45 years ago, roughly. Became a police officer in the suburbs of Chicago in 1980. Continued in that process. I served as a police officer, an investigator. I worked with the drug and narcotic unit for a period of time and was also their lead person with regards to alcohol investigations. That continued till 1986. Then when I went to the police academy and started teaching full-time at the police academy. I'll let you ask another question.
Okay.
I'm not sure where to stop
So,
at.
did you stop teaching at the academy though, correct?
Stopped teaching at the academy in the mid-1990s. I was embarking on my PhD degree.
Okay,
I had an opportunity to work for the federal government as an independent consultant on research studies. And then I also had some local consulting contracts with police agencies as well. Embarked on my PhD studies, started the laboratory, and then taught as a professor. And then I had to leave that because it was difficult with getting into, I was getting phone calls regarding consulting in various cases, and then I started appearing on courts. And it was great in the summertime when I was off, but during the academic year, it was difficult to coordinate teaching and being in the courtroom. So I had to give up my professor position, and that's why I went to the online teaching.
okay, and you own a company now?
Yes, Barron Consulting and LabWorks is my company.
And what does it do?
It does various things. Sometimes we'll conduct independent research with regards to breath alcohol testing with certain machines. We have about 11 different breath test devices. Sometimes I review evidence, forensic evidence, biological evidence such as blood testing, urine testing, collection of samples. Sometimes I coordinate independent testing of those samples in some cases. Some cases just documenting what you observe. Sometimes the urine is leaked out in the bag, or there's compromisation with the blood tubes. So it's just simply documenting and identifying what those observations are and tendering a report. And then review various cases involved in company policies, as far as policies of employees regarding drugs and alcohol. Even consulted with the Sheriff's Department because of the issues of medical marijuana and how that affects their Sheriff's Department employees. And so it was working with both the union side and then also obviously the sheriff and his management team to come together how to deal with that from their employee standpoint. I was able to gain the contract in Peoria for Sam's Club, Walmart, Caterpillar, the United States Coast Guard. So there's a multitude of different employers that I've been involved with over the years regarding drugs and alcohol, regarding their policy aspects. And then insurance companies, in life insurance issues when they find perhaps drugs in the post-mortem samples and determining whether it was illegal use or if it was beyond therapeutic use and whether or not they would pay out the life insurance. So that's when they may hire me directly and to evaluate that so I can share with them and say, yes, it identified amphetamine and methamphetamine. However, the individual had a prescription for Adderall for ADHD. Well, that particular medication will show up as amphetamine and methamphetamine, not the illegal methamphetamine that one is smoking and using. So those are some examples.
So have you testified as an expert in the past?
Oh, yes.
How many times?
At this juncture, certainly well more than 500 times, maybe more than 1,000.
And in how many different states?
About 30 different states from Alaska to the East Coast.
Have you testified in the state of Wisconsin?
I have.
How many occasions?
Probably at least 35 or 40 cases.
Have you ever testified in this county?
I have.
Okay. And what were the subjects of your testimony? I don't mean details of it. What kinds of things were you asked to testify about?
Anywhere from breath alcohol testing to blood alcohol concentration levels, breath alcohol concentration levels, standardized field sobriety testing, behavioral manifestations, things that may affect reliability testing, or give clarification as to here's what the testing does tell us, but here's what the testing doesn't tell us, or the observations tell us. For example, the odor of alcohol. Yes, That is noteworthy, but based upon the odor alone, you can't tell how much a person has consumed or what they consumed, whether it was vodka or beer, but you have the odor, so that's a case where it's a clarification.
Have you, whom have you testified for in your business?
I've testified on behalf of insurance companies, employers, civil law firms, about 50% for the plaintiff and 50% for defendant. In criminal cases, when I worked for the government, it was more than 90% for the government. Since leaving government, it's 90% or slightly more for defense, because the state has budgets of people like me already on the payroll, so there's no need unless it's a unique case.
All right, counsel, let's move
Okay.
this along.
Thank
please.
you. Have you, and do you have any expertise with regard to determining the effects of alcohol consumption?
Yes,
Okay. And have you testified about that in the past?
I have.
Okay. Judge, I'm offering Dr. Henson as an expert in this field.
Well, it no longer requires the court to certify his credentialing, so I will decline the invitation. You can ask your next question, please.
Okay. So did you have an opportunity to review some materials in conjunction with your testimony in this case?
I did.
Okay. What materials did you review?
There were, in the large scope, there were two different videos, but there was a breakdown of the video segments, but the videos from inside a bar establishment, and then a surveillance video from a retail store of some type that showed a portion of an outside area, and the medical records, which was, I think it was a little over like 233 pages.
Okay. And in looking at the medical records, did you note a blood alcohol level that was obtained from Mr. Davies on the day he was taken to the hospital?
Yes.
Okay. And what results did they obtain?
They identified .267.
Okay. Now, can you tell us whether or not you were able to determine, by looking at the records, whether this was whole blood or serum?
They did not break that out. However, it was later identified that it was serum.
Okay. And so do you have to modify the results or change the result based upon it being serum?
Yes, hospitals typically analyze serum or plasma, which is an extraction or a divisor from whole blood, and so therefore a calculation has to be performed to make an equivalent of a whole blood. I use an average of 1.18, which is considered an average conservative value. I think there are some that use 1.16 as well. 1.18 gives a close approximation to that average.
So if I told you that the medical examiner, when looking at that, came to the 267 serum came to a 0.24 result, do you have any problem with that?
No, it sounds like they probably use 16% or 17%, and I used 18%, so more conservative. My number comes out to 0.22, so it's a slight lower using that 1.18 conversion.
Okay, so between 0.22 or 0.24, would you expect anything significantly different between somebody with a 2.4 as opposed to a 2.2?
No, no, you wouldn't.
Okay, using either one of those numbers, what are the kinds of symptoms or that one would find in somebody with that level of blood in their alcohol in their blood?
Sure. It certainly would have gross motor skill impairment, fine motor skill impairment, comprehension would be affected, reactionary time would also be slowed and impacted, as far as also the response, which is arguably closely related to the reaction, and the response would be affected at that level.
Would you expect, or do you have an opinion, whether or not somebody with that blood alcohol level, either the 2.2 or the 2.4, would have difficulty doing kind of large gross motor skills, like swinging a stool?
Absolutely.
And would that matter whether the person was an experienced drinker or no?
Not at that level. It's a significantly high level.
Okay. And you would expect to find that in Mr. Davey, those concerns or those symptoms in Mr. Davies given his blood alcohol level?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I have nothing further.
Cross.
Dr. Henson, you never saw Mr. Davies that night? In person, sorry.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying. Yes, not in person, just the video.
And you've been a police officer at the start of your career, right?
Yes, I did.
And one of the best ways of evaluating impairment is seeing that person in front of you. Is that true?
In person certainly is better than video, yes.
And you talked about tolerance. You kind of talked about it just a little bit here at the end. Do you recall those questions? Alcohol tolerance?
Yeah, it was not term tolerance, but I think that you could insert that in that last hypothetical, that some people may perform better at a 0.10 than others, and that's due to the tolerance.
And that could be the same for 0.20 as well.
0.20 is going to alleviate some factors with regards to tolerance level. However, you are still going to be grossly impaired no matter what your experience is.
Okay, so, but would you agree that a novice drinker who rarely drinks is going to show impairment at a 0.20 differently than somebody who uses alcohol pretty routinely and has a tolerance?
I would agree with that. A novice drinker may not even get to a 0.20.
They could black out, right?
Well, usually they vomit. And then
Okay, yes.
Usually they vomit. So there was one study that I did for the Department of
I'll
Psychology.
stop you.
Okay.
Next question.
And somebody at a 0.20 who has more higher tolerance, they might not be puking at a 0.20.
That's true.
And there's just a lot of factors that depend on what that impairment looks like at a 0.20 based on that individual.
Yes, from a gross motor skill standpoint, there are some differences, but you still wouldn't want them hitting the brakes or the accelerator at a 0.20 no matter what their experience is.
But their weight can affect how they show impairment at a 0.20.
Weight could have some variability in extreme levels because you have some outside influence other than the alcohol.
Food that's in your stomach prior to drinking that could affect how we see a 0.20.
It's going to deal with the absorption, but in this case, food's not a factor. Food isn't going to change that value, and food's not going to change your mental condition. It may change the height in which you get to the peak alcohol level. But in this case, there was between 8.5 and 9.5 drinks in his blood at the time it was tested, and that wouldn't change based upon food consumption.
But you don't know when he drank any of these drinks. You can't say that necessarily without a drink history.
All we know is that's what was in his system. If he started drinking at 6 p.m., then he had a lot more than the 8.5 to 9.5 drinks.
Okay. But you don't have a drink history for Mr. Davies.
I do not.
And to be clear, you reviewed the medical records in terms of finding that alcohol level. Is that fair to say?
The alcohol level and statements regarding intoxication.
Okay. You didn't review the medical records for medical purposes in terms of head injuries or anything like that?
I did not. I'm not an expert on the head trauma part.
And I want to talk about would you agree with the statement that while we can talk about generalities at a .20 and, you know, talk about those certain symptomology and those kinds of things at a .20, it really is something that you have to look at that person and see how they exhibited a .20.
There are some generalities that are across the board, and that was not only borne out in literature, but also I've done the experimentation. But there are some that have some slight variation, but there are some behavioral manifestations and pharmacological effects that is pretty much straight across the board, but there is some variation.
For example, somebody may have slurred speech at a .20, but they may not.
It's all based upon the observer.
The observer and
Do you know how the person normally speaks?
someone can also have a decreased reaction time when they're at a .20.
Not can have, they will have.
So
That's a given.
is it possible that somebody at a .20 might be less capable of reacting to a sudden attack?
Yes, that's what I testified on direct, and I agree.
Now, looking at your educational background, in all of your degrees that you talked about, none of those are in chemistry.
No, I had chemistry as coursework, but not a degree in chemistry.
None of those are in biology.
Yeah, same coursework, but not a specific degree in biology.
None of those degrees are in pharmacology.
Again, coursework, but not a specific degree.
None of those are in physiology.
Again, training in my undergraduate work, but not a specific degree.
And none of those are in medicine.
No, it'd be very light medicine at best, which would be more along the line of first responder. I'm not a clinician in the medical field.
Okay. And as a police officer, you received maybe some more advanced first aid training. Is that fair to say?
Fair to say.
And that was back in the 80s, 90s.
80s, 90s.
Okay. And in all of your training and experience, both government and private, you never worked at some sort of lab testing blood samples?
No, I did a stint at Joliet Forensic Crime Lab, but I was paid by the police agency, not by the crime lab.
And that was more of a observation of how the analyst in that lab did things?
It was training on gas chromatography, mass spectrometry, and blood sample analysis.
And that was around maybe 40 hours.
That's about right.
And you talked about being qualified as an expert in several states, correct?
Correct.
And you would agree you've also been excluded as an expert in states as well?
My testimony's been limited, but not totally excluded. Sometimes there's limitations.
So part of your testimony has been excluded at certain points.
That's correct.
And this case involving Mr. Sehmer, how much were you paid to write your report?
To review all the evidence and everything, and then tender the report, that was $2,000.
And how much were you paid to testify here today?
Testimony's free, but my travel and time was $3,500. That my airfare, overnight stay, rental car, everything is included in that fee.
So about $5,000.
In total?
Yeah.
Yes, in total, and then extract out probably about 12 to 1,500 roughly in travel.
I don't have anything else, Joe.
Any redirect?
Yes, please. Dr. Henson, you were asked about the impact of food and et cetera in terms of the BAC,
Yes.
and you indicated what?
Well, food would impact if I'm dosing an individual or somebody's consuming alcohol. You're not going to achieve as high as a peak with food. It's going to be a little lower, so maybe if I dosed you and you had food, which I did oftentimes after a lunch, I would anticipate that would impact by about 0.02. So if I programmed you to get to a 0.15, I would expect you to actually be a 0.13 because the food is going to slow down that absorption and you won't get quite as high. Versus an empty stomach, you're going to go up much more rapid and you're going to have a little higher point.
All right. You were also talking in your responses to counsel about the fact that it is hard to determine how many drinks a person had without having a drinking history, correct?
In total, we know how much based upon the blood draw in specimens tested, very accurate on that portion. But without the drinking history, I can't tell you how much was consumed during the evening or the day and evening. That I can't tell you.
You indicated in your report that you thought that BAC 2.0 to 2.26 would be somewhere between 8.6 and 9.77 standard drinks. If the drinking had started much earlier, I mean, it had started earlier, say at like 4, would that number be larger or smaller?
No, that number would not change because I'm simply looking at how much was in his blood at the time. The number of drinks would be higher because those would be burned off. In other words, what you drank at 4 in the afternoon, at midnight, it's gone from your system. So you could calculate that and say, well, there was another drink there. Yes, but it didn't impact the blood result in the case. So that's why I know my numbers are accurate for the blood result.
But had the drinking started much earlier, the number of drinks that you would extrapolate would be different.
Would be higher, yes.
There'd be more drinks to get there?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
Because you have to take into account then the burn-off rate.
okay. So as people drink, they absorb and then it starts eliminating.
Right, your liver and your kidneys kick in and start oxidizing that alcohol.
So assuming, hypothetical, that he started drinking, let's just say 6 o'clock, now, or how many drinks would there have had to have been to have him get that level at the time of the blood draw?
Well, we know that approximation, give or take, at about 9 drinks. And then if it was 6 o'clock to get that level, I know that you're probably looking at an additional 5 drinks at a very slow pace, 1 per hour. Could be higher than that.
Okay, thank you. I have nothing
You're
further.
All right, may this witness be released?
Yes.
All right, you can step down.
Thank you, Judge.
Judge, I would move in the exhibits, please.
Numbers, please.
Yes, where are they? Oh, he's got I have them here. I'll grab it. Thank you.
Thank you.
4, 5, and 6. I mean, 104, 105, 106.
Any objection to 104, 105, 106?
No, Your Honor.
Those will be received. We're transitioning back to the state in terms of its case. Does the state have an additional witness?
We do, you don't want to take a break or anything, just keep going?
I think we're doing okay. Let me just take a measure. Anybody need a break?
Sorry, just wanted to make sure.
That's okay. I appreciate your effort, but it looks like we have folks that are just fine. So, next witness.
The state calls Detective Paula Hoffa.
Detective, if you'd come forward. Hand do you swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Have a seat. All right, counsel.
Detective Hoffa, can you please state your full name for the record?
Paula Hoffa,
How do you spell it?
Paulahoffa.
How are you employed?
I'm a detective with the Village of Heartland Police Department.
How long have you been with the Heartland Police Department in total?
17 and a half years, approximately.
How long have you been a detective there?
Almost 10 years.
And prior to that, what was your position?
I was a patrol officer.
And can you tell us about your basic training in order to become a police officer?
I have a bachelor's degree in criminal justice, and then I went to the police academy.
And you graduated from the police academy?
I did.
And since you graduated from the police academy, did you become a certified law enforcement officer?
Yes.
Did you maintain that certification up until today?
Yes.
And in your role as a detective, what kind of investigations do you do?
I am the only full-time detective. It's a small agency, so I do all of the investigations. However, I do specialize in sensitive crimes, crimes against children, and death investigations.
And did you eventually become involved in an investigation involving Kevin Sehmer on around June 17th of 2023?
Yes.
How did you get involved?
The morning of June 18th, 2023, at approximately 2 a.m., I was contacted by my deputy chief on my cell phone, and I was advised of this call, and he asked me to come in and to start working on it.
Okay. And when you came in and worked on it, first of all, were you able to identify Kevin Sehmer?
Yes.
And how did you go about that process?
There was a phone number that had been given during the course of the night of June 17th at the festival, and the officer had found the phone number, gave it to me, and then we put it into our in-house police computer system and got the name of Kevin Sehmer, of having prior contacts in Waukesha County at an address in Brookfield.
Okay. The city of Brookfield?
Correct.
Okay. Did you try to call that number?
Yes.
Did you receive a response from calling it initially?
No.
After that, you learned that he lived in Brookfield, is that true?
Yes.
And you heard a specific address, right?
Yes.
Okay. And at some point, did you go to that address?
I did, along with my third shift lieutenant.
Did anybody else meet you there?
Yes, the city of Brookfield's third shift officers met us there as it's their jurisdiction.
About what time did you go over to Kevin Sehmer's address?
We arrived at approximately 5:23 a.m.
On what day?
That would be Sunday, June 18th.
And when you got there, what did you do?
We knocked on the door. My lieutenant was knocking on the door rather loudly for several minutes. I noticed there was a vehicle in the driveway, so I ran the license plate. I then also started calling Kevin Sehmer's cell phone and texting.
At 5:23 a.m. as you're at his residence, did you ever receive a response at the door?
No.
When you did anybody respond to the door?
No.
Okay. Did you eventually leave the house?
Yes.
Okay. And after that, did you ever receive phone contact from Kevin Sehmer?
Yes, I believe it was around 10:56 a.m. on Sunday, June 18th. He called back my work cell phone.
Okay. And did you talk with him about this incident over the phone in detail?
It was very high level, very brief information.
Did you have Mr. Sehmer come in for an interview?
So at that time, I was already responding back home to my residence, and he said that he wanted to talk, and I said, okay, I need to make some arrangements of either me going back into work or having another officer respond in to do the interview. And so then I started responding back into work and calling some of my bosses, and then Kevin called me again somewhere in between 11 a.m. and noon and wanted to know what was going to happen, and then that's when I made the arrangements that he should just come to the Heartland Police Department to speak with me.
And at the Heartland Police Department, is there an interview room that's able to both video and audio record everything?
Yes.
And is that the room you used?
Yes.
So first of all, Kevin Sehmer comes to the police department, right?
Correct.
And you meet with him.
Correct.
Do you see that Kevin Sehmer that you met with here in court today?
Yes.
Where is he seated? What is he wearing?
He's seated in front of the blue Kleenex box, and he's wearing a dark gray suit and glasses.
That's let the record reflect identification of the defendant.
Objection.
No.
Identification established. Next question.
And then you guys go into the interview room.
Correct.
So now, initially, did you get just some biographical information about Mr. Sehmer?
Yes.
Okay. So what kinds of just basic biographical information did you get?
Well, prior to him actually coming into the interview room, I had run him through our Department of Transportation. And then when he came into the interview room with me, then I got like his name, address, phone number, all of that kind of thing.
And he told you he was married?
Correct.
Okay. And he had some kids?
Yes.
Okay. You got all that information?
Yes.
And then, after you have this initial information, you start talking to him about this day, June 17th of 2023.
I did.
And did you have him go through kind of a timeline of events of that day?
Yes, I just asked him to tell me everything that happened, and I sat there and listened for quite some time.
Okay, so I'm going to bring up prior to bringing this up, did you ask Mr. Sehmer about if he drank any alcohol this night of June 17th, 2023?
I did.
And what did he tell you?
First, he said he had 4 drinks, and then later in the interview, he had said 4 or 5. However, he did tell me that the last drink that he had, he'd only taken a sip out of it.
So he had somewhere between 4 and 5 drinks, right?
That's what he indicated.
Did he tell you like a time frame from when he drank that?
No, however, he did say that he got down into the Heartland area around 8:15.
And did he say when he left the Heartland area?
Not specifically.
But you know that this incident happened around 11 p.m.
Correct.
So in terms of the drink history, you asked him what he had before that time frame, 11 p.m.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask to bring up, and you reviewed this interview that you had with Mr. Sehmer prior to today.
I did.
And now I'm going to bring up, should be Exhibit 18. Oh, that's not it.
There's a,
That's not it, sorry. It's Exhibit 24. Right. Okay, pause. And Detective Hoffa, do you see on your screen Exhibit 24?
I do.
And do you know about how long in total your interview with Mr. Sehmer was that day?
It was approximately 2 hours. The last part of it wasn't like actual question and answer. It was more just procedural, getting things prepared.
Okay, and the clip on the screen, you can see it's 6 minutes and 55 seconds, right?
Yes.
And this looks like a fair and accurate depiction of the video interview that you did with Kevin Sehmer that day.
It does.
I would move exhibit number 24 into evidence, and then I'll ask to publish it to the jury.
any objection?
Judge, I do, but we would probably need to do it at sidebar, I'm sorry to
All right,
say.
well, it's better than sending the jury out, so come on.
Okay.
right, folks, please be seated. The objection that has been raised will be overruled by the court, but the court will also recognize the defense's standing objection.
Thank you.
All right. Is there a question pending? I
So,
think you had moved and asked to publish.
right.
Over objection, then the court will grant the request. And exhibit, what is this, 24, will be received.
And Detective Hoffa, the actual time, day of time, and the date are up in the upper left-hand corner of this interview that you can see on your screen.
Yes.
And your interview started prior to 12:59:28, right?
Started at 12:34.
And this clip is 6 minutes and 55 seconds based on what you can see.
Yes.
And I'm gonna start playing it now, Judge. Well, nope, I moved it, I move exhibit 24 into evidence and request to publish.
Yeah, I received it, and you may publish. Hold on.
Yep.
You gotta do the ink.
You want to restart it?
Yep.
Looked like you had the mic off. Go ahead. You got to click the little arrow thing. No, no,
I know where it is.
the middle. Oh my God, this is like my VCR at home. You've got the sound open, right?
Can we, Your Honor, can we take down the publication to the
Sure.
jury right now?
I can hear something. Is that coming out of your computer?
No, I apologize, Your Honor, this did previously work, and now,
The audio, it's the audio that we're having trouble with.
I can hear something.
I think the audio is just low on the computer. Is that
it was all the way up.
It was all the way up?
You want to move it on tables? Sometimes the
I'm gonna try our
cord gets futzy.
second. Okay.
That's a technical term. I can hear something. Where's that coming out of?
There's a thing.
Is there a way to turn up the sound in the courtroom?
If you have this feeling somebody's going to get blasted out of their seat.
She shows it. There's a drive and it says how to do it. There's a little box.
Turn it up slightly, I don't want to go to full blast.
Okay, let's.
Turn it up more.
Can we try it one more time? Or is it all the way up, Ms. Lemke?
That's fine. That's fine. Restart.
Okay. To make the record clear again, I'm playing Exhibit 24 is on the screen. I request to republish this to the jury now.
I've already granted that. Go ahead.
It's not on the screen is what I'm saying.
Oh, thank you. Turn it on. There we go.
Okay, thank you, Judge. And now I will actually really play it, starting at 00.
We're just doing small talk and stuff. And then she, one of the two girls, they introduced me to the two guys.
Okay.
And, so I shook their, I don't have any idea he had tattoos all over.
Okay.
Now, and all I did is make a comment. I said, we were talking about tattoos before, which we were.
Okay.
And because she was saying, Tom's religious and so is this Lori.
Okay.
So, and I just said, yeah, a long time ago, somebody had said to me that if you get a tattoo, that you're marking out God's work, you know,
Okay.
and it's a sin. And I mentioned that to the guy, and he's like, you must be one of those fucking Catholic boys.
Okay.
And I said, no, as a matter of fact, I'm Lutheran. And I said, but, and he was we instantly did not hit it off, if you will.
Okay.
So I got my drink. I think I had maybe one sip out of it, and that was it. I put it down, and then she introduced me again to the guys, and then her girlfriend. And then when I mentioned about the dads, he came over to me and he's like, yeah, look at these babies, you know. And he goes, I got one of my wife naked, and she's got her boobs. And he's like this, going like this and pushing them together.
Okay.
And I'm like, I didn't say a word. I just said, I'm thinking of myself, impressive. And then, again, you could tell there was tension between us and stuff. So when he called me a Catholic boy, and so that kind of didn't go over real big, but, you know.
So were you upset by that comment that he made?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I didn't, I was just telling, you know, maybe it wasn't appropriate, but I just was just making a comment about tattoos and what I learned from years ago.
So when you said you were upset, then did you start yelling at him?
No, I just said I'm Lutheran, and then and that's when things got a little blurry because it was a little loud in there, and he was saying things, and I was saying things, and I'm like, you know, why don't you two get out of here? I said, why don't you go outside, practice falling down, kind of kidding around. I'll be out there in a little bit, you know.
Okay, so you guys were all like talking?
Yeah, just talking shit, and, you know, guys.
So both talking shit to each other?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And then you said, why don't you just go down and fall down?
Yeah, just, why don't you practice falling down? I'll be right out there, you know. And he had said something to me, you know, like, fuck you, this and that, and I don't even really recall. Now, I'm being honest with you. I don't really recall using any swear words or anything like that, but I was still in control. I knew what was, you know, going on. But I had that feeling with him. I did not like him from the get-go. And
do you know his name?
I have no idea. And so then his wife takes them and takes both of them because they're inebriated and takes them outside the thing to like cool down and whatnot.
Okay.
So then I'm sitting there talking to her about Tom and you know, her girlfriend and stuff. Just us two inside.
Because you were talking to Laura then?
Laura and this other, her girlfriend. And, you know, I'm like, I may have said, like, what's his problem or whatever.
Okay.
And, then all of a sudden he comes back in the bar and says some more shit to everybody real loud.
Okay.
I don't know exactly what he said, but it was directed towards me. And then I kind of lost my cool, and I say I lost my cool. I just said, what did you say? And then I went outside. The girls tried to just, you know, say, just, you know, they're drunk, you know, blah. And I'm like, well, and I swear to you on my dad's grave and on my kid's life, I went outside and his friend and this guy had had stools
Okay.
in their hands, and
So the guy and his friend had stools?
yeah, they're up in the air like this,
Okay.
you know, and I said, what did you say? And then, now, like, oh, now you're gonna hit me with a stool. I'm not saying this, but I'm thinking,
Right.
oh, I'm gonna get knocked in the, with a stool.
Okay.
And 2 stools. So, but so the one friend, he tried to hit me with a stool first, and I don't know really what happened, but all I did is block it, and that was it. And I didn't touch him. I didn't say anything to him, nothing.
Okay.
Then the other guy, the husband, he comes in. He's really, and he winds up and he's gonna not, and I don't know what the hell happened with me if I had like some almost, it was like psychic power or something. I just held my hand there and I just pushed him with the stool in his hand, and I just pushed him away.
Okay.
He fell over onto the ground, and then I left.
Okay.
And I'm like, we're just doing
Hold
it.
it.
Okay. Dr. Papa, you were able to observe that entire clip.
Yes.
So at the end there, Mr. Sehmer says, I pushed him with that stool in his hand and I just pushed him away.
Correct.
Did you ask Mr. Sehmer if he ever punched Mr. Davies or him?
Yes, several times.
So there's just one other thing I want to clarify from this clip. At the beginning, Mr. Sehmer is talking about Tom.
Yes.
Who's Tom? If
That
you
is,
know.
oh, sorry. That is the friend that he came out to Heartland with.
And Tom Knopp,
Knapp.
Knopp.
Correct.
And you spoke with him later.
Yes.
He also talked about Lori at the beginning. Do you know who he was referring to?
Yes, her name is Lori Jacobs.
Okay. It's a completely different person.
Correct.
Not Laura.
No.
So you did ask him about hitting Josh.
Yes.
So now I'm going to ask to take that down, ask to not publish to the jury right now. I want to bring up Exhibit 25. Okay, and Detective Hoffa, do you see Exhibit 25 on your screen?
I do.
Okay, and this is another portion of your interview with Mr. Sehmer on June 18th, 2023 at the
Yes.
Heartland Police Department.
Yes.
And this appears to be a fair and accurate copy, again, of part of this interview.
Yes.
I would move Exhibit 25 into evidence and request to publish. I would also note this is a short 30 seconds.
Over objection, the court will grant the receipt into evidence, and you may publish.
But you
Definitely was open hand. I do remember that it was open hand, but I don't recall him, and I do not recall hitting him in the face whatsoever. I recall not hitting, but pushing the stool, period, into him, and then he fell over.
So you're saying you pushed the stool into the guy and then he went down?
Right.
Okay, did you go down at a pretty rapid rate?
Yeah, real easy.
Okay, and Detective Hoffa, you heard that clip, right?
I did.
And Mr. Sehmer is now saying he pushed the stool into the guy and the guy went down
Yes.
at a pretty rapid rate.
Correct.
I'm going to ask to take down publication to the jury. And I have one more clip, Your Honor. I'm going to bring up Exhibit 26 now. Detective Hoffa, do you see Exhibit 26 on your screen?
I do.
And again, is this a portion of your interview with Mr. Sehmer from June 18th, 2023 at the Heartland Police Department?
Yes.
fair and accurate copy of it as it looks on the screen right now.
Yes.
I would move Exhibit 26 into evidence and request to publish.
Over the same objection, the court will receive Exhibit 26. You may publish.
And to be clear, Detective Hoffa, about how long is this clip?
1 minute and 7 seconds.
And we can play that.
Period. So I'm going like this, trying to, and I think he's going like this and trying to hit me, and as he's doing that, I luckily got a good, with the open hand, I got a good grip of the, and I didn't grip it, but I mean, I got a good spot on the stool where I just, if you want to use the word violently, that's kind of unfair, but I would say, yes, I pushed him down with one open hand, and he immediately went down to the ground, and I didn't say nothing to anybody else. I turned around and I walked away, and that was it.
At that point, okay, so right now the only discrepancy is that you say you pushed the stool into him and pushed him down, and everyone else is saying you made contact with his face and he went down.
Yeah, no.
Either way, he went down by your force. Can we at least agree on that? He went down by your force.
Absolutely.
Okay? Onto the sidewalk, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
Okay. And so Mr. Sehmer agreed with you when he said he was the one causing Josh to fall to the ground.
Yes.
And we can take that down now. Detective Hoffa, I just have a couple quick questions for you. You stated that you ran, well, first of all, DOT records, do those indicate height and weight?
Yes.
And you indicated previously you ran that for Mr. Sehmer.
Yes.
And what was the height and weight for DOT?
I believe it's stated Mr. Sehmer was 6 foot 2 inches and 275 pounds.
Now, do you know Mr. Sehmer's date of birth?
I do not.
You know about how old he is?
He stated he was 63 at the time of my interview with him.
Now, you were able to observe here during testimony that we just have video evidence from Tabby's Wine Bar and then Hometown Pharmacy, right?
Correct.
Did you or other officers look for other video surveillance that would have showed what happened out on the sidewalk?
Yes.
Where did you all look?
There is BMO Harris across the street on East Capitol Drive from Tabby's and the Hometown Pharmacy. We checked there. We checked, there's some apartments across the street, and also Palmer's Restaurant, Steakhouse. We went to all those places and checked for video surveillance. There's nothing that Palmer's did have an exterior camera, but it did not come anywhere near to crossing the street onto the other side of East Capitol Drive.
Did you or any other officers find any video surveillance of what occurred on that sidewalk?
No.
Don't have anything further, Your Honor.
Cross.
Thank you. So, Detective, you obviously had a longer interview than we've seen this afternoon, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And one of the things you tried to figure out is why weren't you able to reach him? Is that right?
Yes.
Mr. Sehmer. And he indicated that his phone wasn't with him. Is that right?
Correct.
And that he found the text from you and then called your office or your department.
Well, what he said was that left his phone at Tom's house. Tom then brought his phone over to Kevin's house and said, hey, the Heartland Police are trying to get a hold of you. And then Kevin contacted me after some time.
All right. And you played a portion of the video where my client indicates that both Joshua and this other gentleman, Brian, came at him with a stool. Is that right?
That's what he indicated.
And then you, after talking to him for a while, he ultimately agreed that, yeah, that probably didn't happen. It was just Joshua.
Correct. I
that true?
started, oh, sorry.
Is that true?
Yep.
Okay. So while what you played is what he said initially, he ultimately agreed, no, that's not right. I didn't, he being Brian, the other guy didn't do anything with the stool. Is that correct?
After I challenged him on that, yes.
Yeah. And in that last clip you played, I wanted to see if I understood your answer. You're not suggesting that my client ever said that he punched Joshua in the face, are you?
What Kevin and I agreed upon is I said to him that the witnesses indicated that he made contact with Joshua's face, and Kevin repeatedly said he did not. He used an open hand and violently pushed him. So at the end, he agreed with me that his force caused Joshua to fall.
The force of him pushing the stool that was being swung at him, correct?
That's what Kevin stated happened.
Yes.
Yes.
The issue isn't what you think, the issue is what he said. And he didn't say, I violently pushed him to the ground. He said he used violent force to stop the stool from being swung at him. Isn't that right?
There was another point in the interview where he did say that he violently pushed him.
Pushed the stool, not his person. Isn't that true?
Yes, we went back and forth on that matter of the stool, where it was, or if Josh had it, all those sorts of things.
You're not suggesting Mr. Sehmer ever said that Josh didn't have that stool, are you?
No.
And in fact, Mr. Sehmer was quite clear that Joshua had a stool that he swung at him.
Yes.
And that all he did was block that stool as it was swung at him. Isn't that true?
I don't know if he ever used the word swung at him, but he said that he pushed the stool into Joshua.
Well, I think we saw it on one of the videos. He actually used that motion, didn't he?
He used those motions, but he didn't say the words.
Well, the motion he was showing you was of somebody swinging the stool. Isn't that true?
Yes.
I have nothing further, thank you.
Any redirect?
Did Mr. Sehmer ever say during this interview that Josh tripped over the stool and fell?
No.
Nothing else?
Any recross on that limited scope?
No, thanks.
All right, you can step down. Ladies and gentlemen, we're close to the required stop time, so I'm going to conclude the testimony for today. I'll release you. I'll direct that you not discuss this case amongst yourselves or with anyone else this evening. We'll have you back here tomorrow at 8:20, and Tom will give you any other direction in order to find your way out. I want to wish you a good balance of your evening. That's it.
All right.